everybody doing today?
Doing great.
You guys having fun?
Yeah.
Got a couple of Star Wars people here, a couple of new Star Wars people. My name's Larry. I work for the convention in a lot of different facets. I got asked to take and do this panel. I'm pretty laid back with panels, so you guys got questions, you're going to get to ask questions, talk to these guys. First up, we have, we'll start with Dorian Kingi, which if you have watched any of the new Star Wars stuff that has been on Disney Plus, is most recognizable. This young man down here shaking his head for Cad Bane, making an actual live action appearance instead of on a cartoon, right?
Yeah, very excited.
It's very, very cool, very cool. And then we also have Barry Lowin here, which Barry's done a bunch of stuff, but Barry has most recently been known for doing Mandalorian. And in a facet that I'll just ask a question right off the bat. I'm used to Pedro being who is Mondo. You do stunts, you in the costume part of the time. It looks like there's multiple people that have been in the costume a lot. So
you're going to get me in trouble right out of the gate. Okay. So Emily Swallow, who plays the armor, I think was the first person I heard say, like, you're going to see a little red laser on my forehead. That someone's going to take me out. There are so many things you cannot say.
I'm not trying to get you in trouble. Right. I can say things you can't.
So I work on the show as an actor. I've done a lot of physical acting most of my life. I went to school for theater and journalism and then was a gymnast for a long time. And performed for Cirque du Soleil. And so I've done a lot of physical acting my whole life. That kind of helped me transition into playing Mando. But yeah, there are a few of us that work together to make up this guy, and there are so many working parts of a show like this where there's often multiple units filming at the same time, so can't really be in two places at once, right? But yeah, I do some of the physicality, but for stunt work, Lateef Crowder won an Emmy for his stunt fights in this show, and he's one of a kind and super talented. And so I definitely do not want to take credit for any of his amazing work. I don't think there's anyone else in the world that can do what he does. But yeah, it takes a village.
No, and that's awesome because I think a lot of people don't realize that kind of stuff. Working for Days of the Dead, one of the biggest things that I never really understood, I'm not a huge Halloween person. And our Days of the Dead convention, if there's anybody in here that's been to it, very horror related. Tony Moran is one of the original Michael Myers from the first Halloween movie. Well, there were like 8 people that wore that mask and that jumpsuit in that first movie. So, I mean, even John Carpenter had it on at one point. So you had multiple people to take and do this stuff in multiple places. So I think it's pretty unique to take and see them still do that kind of stuff now that they did back then. I know back then it was more of a financial thing. It was whoever was on set and they could use at the time, they threw them in a suit and put them over on the side. Now it's a little different, but it's still always really cool and unique to see that they still do that for the different aspects of that character and what they need to be done with them.
I mean, yeah, I think that happens in so many shows. I mean, because of this show, I've met a lot of people that are stunt doubles, and yeah, and in that world, those people are getting a lot more credit these days, rightfully so. And I had somewhere I was going with that and I lost it, but yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you. No, it's one of those things I've actually, that's been in my head thinking about. It's like, I've never really looked to see who's in the show other than knowing some of the main people that are already there that I've grown up watching, for years at my age, with different things. So then to look at the actual breakdown of the cast and who's doing this and doing this, like, oh, wait a minute, and they will occasionally say, like, stuntman. But they don't always differentiate that with the breakdowns of who's in the shows, either who's the stuntman. when you look at the casting?
Yeah, I think one thing I was going to say is that what's really important, I know, for this show is continuity to the directors and the producers. So no matter who you would happen to be watching that's in that suit, that the goal would be that, you know, you're just watching Mando be Mando, and that's the most important thing, that it's one person, one character.
Definitely. So, Darian, my question with you would be, what's it like to bring a cartoon character to life and get into makeup and suit to be campaign?
So it was really stressful, to be honest, because Corey Burton is the voice. Speaking of, you know, the concept of bringing characters together, that, you know, I tried to keep my morning voice throughout the whole shoot and just have a cadence similar to what, you know, Corey would do, but at the same time, he created this staple of what people have known from the Clone Wars and, you know, this fan favorite that I had to learn about after getting the role in itself. But having the things I really do like, which are obviously Star Wars is one, and I've never been a part of it until now, and then I love spaghetti westerns, so, which I've never been a part of until now as well. So those two, all these elements kind of like collab together for me, and then also just coincidentally, because like I quick draw as a kid, so they're like, hey, we're gonna teach you to quick draw, and I'm like, actually, I already know how to do that. Like, really? So it was just these elements that I've kind of inherently had trained as a kid and just goofed around with just for fun, ended up becoming something that, you know, was this melting pot of a character down the road. I did take it super serious too, because like I said, these fans everybody has this idea of what it is and what it was, and, you know, you've seen it already in cartoon, and then, you know, but anything that's in an anime, you can't always translate that into something that has literal gravity involved, actual like human ergonomics. And they're like, oh, his head's not the right size, or his hat's too small. And I'm like, well, the hat was bigger than this hat, and every take they'd come up and they'd cut, and I'd have to bend down, and there's this little prop gal or wardrobe gal, super sweet. She's like tweaking my hat like every single take. I'm like, is it straight enough? They're like, yeah, make sure, no, it's not on this side. Okay, right, okay, perfect, do it again. Like just every single take they'd have to fix the hat. Or like there's no animatronics in the face, right? So it's all glued to my face, but now trying to make it look like my mouth, you know, to talk and move correctly, and doing like face yoga because the prosthetics are so, you know, kind of thick that you have to force the lips to stay closed at one point too. So now I'm, you know, there's a lot of interesting aspects to go with it. And then I didn't, like I said, really didn't want to disappoint the fans as much as humanly possible, because you can't please everybody. But to make him menacing, you know, I think that was the coolest and hardest part for it in my mind. And then working with Rodriguez, which was awesome and such a dream come true for my personal fandom. It was cool because he's like, no, go further. I'm like, really, this is getting kind of dark. I was like, this is a kid show, but he just really helped bring it to life with that as well too. So yeah, like I said, outside of me taking it super, super serious and really wanting to do the best that I could for Filoni and Favreau and the rest of the fans that already knew of this character in cartoon, it was, you know, it was more stressful than I would like to admit, but it's because I took it seriously. So yeah, and I hope people liked it enough, obviously.
So away from the Star Wars, give me a little bit about how each one of you, either one of you can start, how you got started in the business.
Go for it. You're already talking.
My thing, interesting, so mine's the family business, sort of. My mom's an actress, my dad's a stunt man, and they got together on a show back in the day, and maybe a few people here know this. It was called The Bionic Woman. So they knew each other from that, and then, you know, several years later I came along. But I was on set, baby, so, you know, it was in my mom's contract that I had to, you know, be breastfed every 2 hours no matter where they were filming and what the situation was. So like being a part of the circus was like normal to me. Like, oh, my dad's a plumber and he owns, you know, a plumbing shop, and you're like a second or third generation plumber. So this was just kind of a normal setting for me. I didn't know if I actually wanted to get into it. As a kid, I just thought this was normal. So then cut to, I guess I was 11 years old. I got my first stunt job on a movie called Double Dragon. I was part of the Power Corps, and that was really cool and awesome, but I had to finish high school, so I do little stunt acting jobs here and there, because this is when kids were able to double kids, and most kids don't do that now. They get like little people to double kids now for general safety issues, but you know, if you're a second generation stunt person, you've kind of been indirectly, you know, groomed into being a stunt kid, because you do every sport under the sun, or you play fight all the time with your dad. So that's kind of what I ended up doing, and then it just rolled into the first creature job I did was after, just actually, senior year of high school, they remade The Time Machine with Guy Pearce, right, 2001, and I got called from the stunt coordinator, and he said, hey, are you claustrophobic? And I go, no. He's like, okay, I want you to double this guy named Doug Jones. And I'm like, cool, who's that? And I go, oh my gosh, come to find out Doug Jones is amazing. I've watched his work indirectly, right, being a kid, and then was a spy warlock for him, and then just kind of followed him in the creature world, and we did like Silver Surfer together, and a couple other shows, and kind of was my mentor at that point, and then branched off to kind of do my own thing in the creature world with legacy effects. So yeah, tall and skinny and not claustrophobic, which are my main attributes.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, we don't choose this, it chooses you. I am from a small town, Louisiana, but I was from as far back as I can remember I was performing. I was making shows in my backyard or filming things with the VHS camera, like we'd get the whole neighborhood involved. An outlet for me there was a gymnastics gym, so I grew up as a gymnast and also did a lot of acting and musical theater, and those things just kept working together, acting and doing just all sorts of crazy physical things. I actually remembered recently, I used to be fascinated at the circus when people would spin from their necks, and I guess my parents were okay with me, like I hung a rope from a tree and had a bandana tied to it, and there was duct tape involved, and I would like climb up a ladder and put my neck in the thing and then kick the ladder over and spin. And now I'm like, to my mom, I'm like, that was okay? Like, no one thought this could potentially go wrong? Anyway, so yeah, I've been performing my whole life, and just the crazier and more fun and creative it can get, the better.
Does anybody have any questions for either one of these gentlemen?
I feel like you have a question.
I was just going to tell you, don't go home and try what he just talked about. Don't listen to that. I don't think Mom would be happy with that.
Yep.
I was gonna say, you do a lot of makeup. Like, what was your most like intense like makeup on?
That's a good question. Two things come to mind. One was the Amityville Horror with Ryan Reynolds. So the scary leashed Indian that was haunting the house. There was a scene that they put in, but it was chopped up really kind of quickly as a flashback of kind of, I'm not gonna, these kids aren't detailed, but kind of what the slave owner was doing to the Indians, right, back in the thing, and they were doing a lot of scalping. And I remember looking down, and I'm like, hey, you almost done? I had to lay on the table, and they had to do the full chest prosthetic. And I'm kind of squeamish anyway, but I thought I'd be fine. It's like, no big deal. They're like, yeah, you can check it out. I look, they go, oh, no. No, I'm not looking at it. He's like, what's wrong? I'm like, no, it's fine, it's good. He's like, you want to look at it? I'm like, no, I'm going to throw up. I literally could not look at it. It looked so real. It was super darling. It's just, the prosthetic aspect. That was like the squeamish part about it, but worked on a TV show called The Magicians in Canada. And it's kind of like a Harry Potter-ish feel, but that was, for me, I've known people that have done way longer prosthetic work or makeup, but for me it was like a 5-hour pre-call. So that was a full body makeup with just paint and nails and headpiece and nose and teeth and all this other stuff and eyes, and it was really long. And so for me, I think that was like kind of the longest, most intense thing. And so I'm showing up, we said 5 hours before the sun goes up, before everybody shows up, and then by the time everybody's like, hey, they're ready to shoot, you're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was like, I've been there for like 8 hours, just let you know if I'm a little tired, I'm gonna try it. But that's the whole, right, the facade of like, you just the ins and outs of being like even like in a suit, or Barry to do some stuff recently in season 3 that I'm sure was quite a bit of time sitting in a chair to be ready for something that everybody doesn't really understand how much prep it goes into, and then if you have to get out of it, but then you have to be back in it for weeks at a time, so you're getting alcohol wipes and getting the glue off your face, and the next day you're having to put it on, but maybe you have a cut or a lesion, and so then that burns because you have more glue on top of that for the next day. So it's like, if you're okay with just constant physical torture, then you can do creature work as well. So it's not for the faint of heart. Skin wise. I think that's why they always say, you guys have such good skin. I was like, because it's constantly being ripped off our face.
You get a facial when you do that stuff.
Yeah, it's the kind you don't.
Yeah, no, not at all. Anybody else? Question? Right in the back there.
This is for both of you. What is your most memorable role that you enjoyed the most doing?
That's your question. That's a good question. Most memorable.
Well, I think the first thing that just popped in my mind was when I was a kid, I did a lot of theater, and I got to play the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz when I was like 12, and that was pretty awesome. I mean, I have to say I crushed it. Like, I really did. Yeah, it was... I don't know, I'll see if I can find some footage of it and get it out. I may have peaked at 12.
That is awesome. That's so funny.
Yeah, because it's interesting because there's so many nuances that go into each role that we get to play, right? Because each one has like a different place in your heart, possibly, for what it is. I think the one that everyone's like, what's your favorite thing you ever did? Like, same thing. I think mine immediately goes to working with Doug Jones on the Silver Surfer for Fantastic Four 2. Because at the time, I was in high school, tall, skinny kid, acne, and was obviously not a jock. And we like comic books and all this other kind of stuff, and then played basketball, but still, very thin, still agile, but not cool. And I remember being kind of treated a little poopy by some of the seniors who would go to games and support them, and a couple guys were not super nice. Cut to after high school, we did Time Machine, and then right after that, we did Silver Surfer. And I was like, I booked the role with obviously with Doug, and being in the suit was like so cool. And I was like, I surf anyway, and it all worked out really great. And I ran into a guy that was he was the point guard at the time, one of the not nice people, and he asked me, like, saw me at a mall randomly. He's like, hey, I didn't know he knew my name, right? He's like, hey, it's dude Dorian. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? What are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just got a job now. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing like stunts and creature stuff. And he's like, what's that? And I told him the show, and then afterwards, it's like, I was like, what are you doing? Because he was supposed to make it to the NBA and all this other stuff. And he's like, no, I'm working at the local Y now and this and that. And I was like, cool. Have a good day. I was a little, I wasn't trying to be mean, but I was a little stoked for like a hot second. To where I was like, that show gave me a couple reasons to be excited. But it's like, the Revenge of the Nerds. We can do it, guys. We can totally do this. We can make it happen. So there's a lot of, special place in my heart for that one.
So you mentioned, and I already was snooping and being nosy with both of you as far as your backgrounds and stuff. Mom and Dad, very influential with growing up on set. Doug sounds like he was working with him. Anybody else that was a big influence for you?
I guess the creature evolution of it was actually John Rosengrant was a good friend and a very big proponent. He's one of the main owners of Legacy Effects. He just recently retired from Legacy Effects, but his faith in me and my versatility, I guess, or the potential for versatility in doing creature work with Legacy Effects, I think he was a really big help, and he's always trying to throw my name in there, and he's like, no, you can do it. It was just really cool. He kind of brought me into the fold a little bit more on, got to do like little puppeteering and that kind of stuff too, with like Mike Benzel and like a show. And I think you have these people with different elements that can really just support you, like your parents, they're trying to help you out, or or uncle or cousin or something. But I think that was another element that I wasn't expecting with somebody from that shop being so supportive. So John was pretty awesome.
How about you, Barry? Anybody that was like really influential in your background and you actually ending up where you are now?
I guess I would probably have to say my dad at this moment, because my dad always, he always called me a song and dance man. And, there's a lot of people that go into entertainment or decide to be actors and their parents are not really excited about that. It's like, why don't you just be a lawyer? And so I feel like maybe the support of that just gave me the freedom to try a lot of things that, I guess could have been squashed. And then I think in Mandalorian, for me, a really huge part of that was a woman named Tamara Carlson Woodard that works for Legacy Effects also. She also played Max Rebo. She's a really just cool person, and she was with me almost every day, especially on the first season, and I don't think I would have gotten through a lot of that without her. Mando would not have made it, so she was really influential in that. You had a question too, didn't you?
Yeah, for a series that the characters have diatribes about how much they hate sand, they love to put you guys in armor and latex and stuff and drop you in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
Is that a nightmare? Or you used to it after you just do it?
No, I think that's again, like I can say, I've worked for Cirque du Soleil for a long time, and so in that it's very similar, where it's like, we're going to put you in the most bizarre costume you could possibly be in. The last role I did for them, I was a character in a show called Kuza, and I played the trickster, and I started my show every day getting shot out of a Jack-in-the-Box, and they're like, that's not enough, we're going to cover your face in makeup. That's not enough, we're going to put white contacts. And so you just kind of, over time, they just want it to look great, and usually that doesn't coincide with functionality. But yeah, there's multiple moments where, what you're wearing may not be built for the most streamlined performance, but that's what has to happen. So yeah, multiple times with sand in the helmet, it's like once they throw in some sort of fake smoke or fog, maybe there's like black lava rock, and I remember one scene I had to drop out of the ceiling, and I just was like, in my head I was thinking, I can't actually see anything, and I don't know how far the floor is away. Okay. And you just kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, it's the interesting part too, is that you indirectly you're training, like you said, whether he's swinging from a tree in his backyard to becoming a professional cirque performer to being ready for like almost anything, and you're really hoping and praying that it goes well, and then miraculously when you potentially do it correctly on the first few takes, they think it's easy. In the meantime, then you go, boom, you landed. You're like, awesome, please don't do me. Don't ask me to do it again. Don't ask me to do it again. Don't ask me to do it again. Like you're praying, oh, let's do that again. I'm like, oh, well, we're gonna see what happens now. And there's a lot more like hoping on our side that it works out. Calculated risk as well, obviously, in the stunt department too. You do R&D, you test things out, but you're still, that's why there's multiple takes. But we do really hope that it works out for the best, and you don't want to slip and fall or do whatever you have to do, because and like I said, they just keep adding spices to the soup until they think it tastes good. They just keep throwing spices at you.
Yeah, it's from both of us from young ages, you're just doing crazy stuff, and so those things start to morph together. So you're really not surprised. Once I had to walk on 4 stilts as a giant rabbit, and I was basically blind. So I think after that, I was like, I don't think there's anything that's going to be harder than this. There's several moments on the show where I was shooting real flare guns while riding a speeder bike, and I'm like, everybody's cool with this? Okay,
Awesome.
let's go for it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, you're sometimes
Yeah, I mean, luckily I haven't had the most severe ones that I know of happening, and it's interesting that now with social media and stuff, I mean, my dad's generation, they came up with a whole different form of R&D than they're on, and the amount of, trial and error that really went into that kind of stuff. So I mean, it wasn't a perfect science, it still isn't, but I've hurt my back pretty good on the RoboCop reboot. We were doing the end sequence and I'm supposed to get shot and flung back and hit the floor and kind of hurt my spine a little bit without going into too much details with that. But it's interesting because, like you said, with the mental prep and the time that it takes to kind of continue on doing a take, you're like, how are you? And you're like, I'm good. You better do one more. You got another one in you? I said, yes, but it has to be like right now while the adrenaline's kicking in. And then afterwards, you're like, how's it going? You're like, cool. Can I just go see the doctor now? So you end up going to do that kind of thing, and it's almost like a professional athlete concept in a different way, right? Because we all are very athletic usually that are in this particular room, like Latif and Barry and the other people. But there's set medics in place for those kinds of scenarios. They go, hey, this one might go south, but they have the most prep that they can, and they all hope for the best. But car crashes is a really big one as well. If you have two cars crashing into each other and you have roll cages in there, but there's still human bodies and bones and things that can go wrong. Things do go wrong, but they also try to prevent them as much as humanly possible in that, certain scenarios, or every scenario, I should say.
Yeah, I think thankfully things have come a long way, and we didn't have to be a part of the research and development. I remember hearing more stories about a lot of high falls. Back in the day, they would do higher and higher high falls, and they weren't sure what air mats were rated for, and so you might do a high fall and just go right through the mat, or you miss a mark. So I'm thankful for everyone that came before us. You ever worked with Dorinda Moore? Mm-hmm. So she's a stunt coordinator now, but trained with Chuck Norris, and I worked with her on a film, and she told me once she was supposed to drive a car off a cliff, and it was attached to a cable, so she drove the car off the cliff, and it was okay, and they got the shot, but they're like, we just want to do one more, just one more. And she's like, I don't think I should get in it again. It's not really tested for that or rated for that, and so she decided she wasn't going to get in again, but they still pushed the truck off the cliff. The cable broke and the truck crashed, like she would have died. But she took care of herself. So I think enough of those things happened that have made things a bit safer. I had more injuries in live shows, just because when you're in live shows, at one point I was doing 2 shows a day, 5 days a week, 475 shows a year. So people it becomes routine and you check out and things go wrong. So thankfully, I think we've learned from a lot of that stuff. Yeah. I hope.
So you've worked on a lot of big budget stuff. What's the difference between doing something like Richie Strangler, where you're just can you talk about that? That's like a cult classic, but there's got to be a huge difference between working on something like that and doing fantastic.
You're awesome. You get like the best question of the day.
And so he actually likes to be called just the greasy straight.
That is so funny. You know what? To be honest, lower budget stuff for the most part is literally more fun. I hate to say it, honestly is, because the amount of stress.
There's less cooks in the kitchen.
There's less cooks in the kitchen. And because there isn't as much money in us, that you're super worried about with like, oh, it's the insurance company or the hedge funds or the producers or the studios, and they're freaking out about all this other stuff. People are just like, let's just see what happens. I don't know, I'm super excited right now. Like, you don't know, sometimes and as long as it's, certain things, whether it's safe or silly, or if it's like a prosthetic head that has to explode, and then you do it, and the blood splatters, it gets all over, like, the camera guys and everybody else, they're like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Like, people are just like having a little bit more fun, it's a little bit more relaxed. There are elements of like your you know, you get to do something really cool on a big budget show. Like there was like a massive fight scene that you have to do, and it's this like 100-beat fight that's all this one shot and all these special effects going off, and you actually just crush it. You do it really well from start to finish. They go cut, you just go, oh, that was so awesome. Like you just feel like invincible because you felt like you trained so hard for that moment, and everybody's like, yeah, that was great. And I was like, that's right. Like because you get these moments for yourself. So I think it kind of varies depending on what it is. There's a lot more downtime as well in big budget stuff too, to where, you know, like setting up, you know, a really big stunt sequence, you know, takes a really long time. Or if they're like, hey, we have to blow up this building today, you're like, all right, well, everybody go hang out for 4 hours while special effects sets that up. So, you know, there's not a lot, the flow is very different as well in that aspect too. And then, you know, like putting together a sports team that wins, you know, the Stanley Cup or whatever it is, right? Putting together a movie is the same concept. So if you have a really good team, you know, of all the department heads that flow together and people are communicating well and everybody's kind of on the same page, or they're just, that makes a big difference too. And then you get, you know, people that are like screaming and yelling and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, that's not fun because nobody wants to be screamed and yelled at, that kind of thing. So it depends on, like I said, that aspect of it as well. But like they both have their places on what it is, but there is like a sweet spot, I think, personally for me, that's just, you know, it's kind of like in the, I'd say probably like the $15 million to like $25 million range. But once you start getting into like the $80 million to like $200 million range, it's such a different animal of the type of energy of the film, and it's a lot of, it's just interesting. It changes it a little bit, yeah. Or you just get the $100 a day ones that are just like so awesome. You just show up and it's like making a short film, but you're kind of getting paid. Yeah.
Yeah, there's less checks and balances, and so the higher the budget, the more checks and balances there are, where there's like, well, we need 5 people to approve Dorian's shirt, you know, versus maybe a smaller budget where someone's like, hey, I hired the costumer, I trust that person, go for it. And that, it definitely has a very different feel. Yeah.
The greasy strangler.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
one,
that's so funny.
I've done a panel with it. I did in one of our day shows. We've had them a couple times.
Really?
And those two are nuts. They're completely nuts. Even doing a panel with them.
It's so
I
funny.
didn't realize you were
Man,
involved with that.
so wait, quick story with that. So one of the funny things about that is, or many, but when he has to like clean himself off and he walks through the working car wash, right? I was like, he's in his, I don't know, he's like in his like 70s, right? He has to be at least in his 70s. And he doesn't have any clothes on, by the way, right? And they're like, yeah, so we're having him walk through this car wash, he's naked, and this, that. And I go, excuse me? You're gonna have a 70-year-old man walking through a working car wash naked while it's on, just those things slapping him in the face and hitting him in all other parts of his body. That would not be awesome. And they were like, yeah, and I'm like, that's not happening. That's not happening. What do you mean? I was like, they were really trying to press for it. I was like, I'm walking. I was like, I'm leaving. They're like, no, my producer buddy that brought me onto it, and I told him, I was like, hey man, this is just too much. I can't do this. Well, just figure it out, make it work. I go, all right, cool. So the other producer was like, hey, I got my buddy. We're gonna have him walk through the car wash first as a tester. I'm like, awesome, let's do that, right? So I figured he's gonna leave the room and come back with no clothes on. He comes back, he's in a full ring slicker top and pants and boots. He's got the drawstring tied, or all you see is like this, right? You see like his eyes and like a little bit of his nose. I'm like, first of all, this doesn't count. But okay, let's do it anyway, because I know exactly what's gonna happen. So he start her up. Dink starts slapping around and the foam's going and the water's going. He literally gets maybe like 15 feet into it to where those big propellers are turning. He walks and the one hits him right in the neck. Ow, 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 my eye. And I'm like, okay, cut, are we good? So this guy is 90% covered in his body and he's in his 30s. And you want this other guy in his 70s to walk through naked? No, this is not happening. Like, okay, fine. But those are the things that you come into where you're just like, when did you think that this is a good idea? So, long story short, we made it all safe. I made sure all the things were just open because they're not closed, right? He has like a channel of safety, like this walkway, and you just kind of stack the camera and it looks like he's walking through and he's pretending like things are hitting him. but that was so funny to do. Watch that, and there's kids around, so I can't go into more detail. That show was hilarious. It was hilarious. Thank you for reminding me about that show. By the way.
Anybody? Any questions?
I got another one for both of you. What was one of the stunts that, like, when they described it to you, sounded a lot worse than what actually was?
Actually, that's never really the case.
To me, that's never really the case. They're usually like, yeah, we're just gonna do this. And you're like, cool. And you show up and you're like, so you're gonna be on fire, getting hit by a car, going through that wall, but then there's like spikes on the other side of that. I'm like, you just said I was gonna walk into the street. No. To a certain extent, it usually isn't as, if somebody knows you and you're like, hey, Barry, I need you to come in for a day, it's not usually as bad of a thing because they'll prep you for it. Versus like, hey, I got this car hit that I need you to do. And then you kind of get like, what kind of car is it? Like, what's the scene? And then things kind of can change on the day a little bit, but it usually, from my personal experience, they will prep you. Unless they know you really well too, then that's kind of not fair because they know what you can do. And they're like, hey, come on dude, do this thing. And you're like, wait, what? I thought it was just a fight scene. Well, yeah, but you still have to like, I mean, this guy's gonna hit you with a brick in your head first and then you have to fight. And then there's this, and you're like, oh, wait, what? So it just kind of like evolves into, you know, this trust factor. So it's almost like if you know somebody more, it doesn't necessarily work for you sometimes, right?
I don't know. I've never
Had that situation happen. So it's always worse.
It's always there. Yeah. Yeah. So funny. But yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we talked about a lot of the good things you've done, and then some weird things that I didn't realize. Crazy strangler. What's been one of the worst times you've had on a set? I don't want anybody to get in trouble, so.
That's
But or one of your least favorites that you've done.
Yeah. That's a good question.
I'm not gonna say the name of the show, but this is like a perfect example of what the talking about nuances, right? Of like when you have a good sports team or not. I was on one movie out of the country, and then I came back to work on another movie, and the movie out of the country, like it was a great group of people, like I knew all of them really well. You know, we were doing really cool stuff. We were all trying to be, you know, really creative and safe and fun, and it was really challenging. But we were a team. Like we were like Navy SEALs. Like, we were in the muck together, but we were getting it done, and we were having like really building memories on that show. And then I went to another show right after that where I didn't really know anybody, and it was just a really kind of like hostile environment. It was very rude and just very unappreciated, and it was just so. I was like, what am I doing here? And I was making more money too, which was really interesting too. I was like, this is a big boy show. I was like, I just don't want to be here right now. Like, this is not fun. Like, I don't want to be a part of this scenario. And you know, it's like, you got to get it through. You sign the contract, you're going to do the best job that you can, but you just felt like, you know, you're in solitary confinement at that point, like in your own head, because nobody appreciates you. It's like if you're the best sports player on the team, but they're like, you know, you missed that one pass, and you're like, well, I just made a triple-double, and I'm like the best player on the team. Well, you still could have done better. So it was this unappreciated, and it's not like you need a pat on the back like every second, but I think that one show, it just kind of gave me this bearing of, as you go along, hopefully you have the ability to kind of pick and choose a little bit. Like, you don't, you know, we're not like, hey, I have these multi-million-dollar offers. It's not like that. But if you find out who you can potentially work for, you're like, I'm never working for that person again, you know, because I don't want to be treated like a piece of meat or just really unappreciated in any way, shape, or form. So you kind of will learn how to circumnavigate the industry sometimes of who you do or don't want to work with down the road. And I feel like that's a big lesson for people to have. And in probably any field, right? You know, if you work at a convention, you're like, oh, that promoter's really cool, and then you're like, don't work for that promoter because that person, you know, that's a thing too. So I think it's a big learning curve for that with Hollywood stuff as well, for me.
Yeah, I would almost say the same thing. It's just, thankfully, on Mandalorian and most of that world, it's not like that. But to work on a production where there's a class system and you watch from the top people be treated as if they're less than other people, it's hard to watch, and it ultimately makes the whole thing really negative. So it's really nice to work on a production of any scale where no matter if someone's a background actor or you're the director, that everyone's treated the same, and that, you know, with respect, and no human has more worth than another person or more value. And that's a nice feeling, because when you work on a production and people are treated, oh, well, you're better than this person, so we're going to treat you better, and you make more than that person, so we're going to treat you better. It's gross. So it's really nice to work on a show where that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Anyone else? Silence. I know, silence. Silence.
Book of Boba Fett Season 2? Is Cad Bane dead?
I wish I knew. Yeah, can you call Filoni and be like, hey bro?
I think you'd be the one to have his number.
Yeah, right? I wish I knew. Yeah, they're so secretive with everything. It'd be great to get the call at some point.
But you got the script and then you find out that you're gonna die when you show up.
Yeah, it was awesome and not at the same time. I was like, yeah, and I'm like, cool. Wait a minute. You said it was one of your favorite characters. Yes, but you kill him? Like, what's the deal? So yeah, it was kind of an interesting, push me pull you moment. But I don't know. Like they keep leapfrogging from show to show, so I don't know. Hopefully they do season 2, but I haven't heard anything yet. Yeah.
What about Barry? What was your best interaction or like your experience working with Grogu?
I had a lot of really great moments with him. And what makes, I think, Grogu really special is that most of the time, from my perspective, I don't see anyone operating him. So he really does appear to be real in those moments, and so it's just really easy to go right into like a moment because everything looks real. So you're telling this kid, like, what are you doing? You know, was probably my favorite was the wire scene. You know, no, not the red one, the blue one. You know, and then that, because from that perspective, it was very real. You're just trying to, get this little creature to do what you want him to do. Yeah, and a lot of that goes to Legacy Effects, who created him and brought him to life, and are so skilled at making him be alive. Yeah.
Minus the cooing, you don't get to hear that though.
No, I mean it's one really special thing about, I think, this whole world that they've brought back, Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, all of these shows, is that as much as they can make something practical and real, they will. So yeah, there's sound there. What you're watching is probably the same thing I experienced and everybody else on set. So as long as they can, they'll go to the ends of the earth, of the universe, to make it real if they can, before they use anything not real.
Now, like on the helmets with like the shininess of it, like, do they have to like remove things out of the helmet, like when they're filming down on you or whatever?
Yeah.
You would think you'd be able to see it because it's so clear. And also, like, I have like the Black Series helmet, and you can see through the tint. It's not tinted enough to like completely have you out. But your guys is more like a green like tint, isn't it? Or is it black? Like the part that you look out.
The lens?
Yeah, the lens. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but what I can say is that's when you have lighting designers and you have all these people that are so skilled at what they do, so nothing has to be taken out because it never got in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's usually you know, while a shot is happening, someone's saying, oh, no, we can see this or that. Like, so you, instead of having to take it out, you just make sure it never gets in, and that's when you hire people that are skilled at what they do that make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see on Facebook when they'll post the pictures of like some random guy that you can see in the corner of the picture. You know?
Yeah, nobody wants to be that guy. So they work harder not to be that guy.
No Starbucks cups.
Yeah. I know, can you imagine? That would have been awful. That guy will never live that down.
Sure, go for it.
One for Barry, because you wear that armor and stuff, are there different versions of that you have to wear for different stunts as well?
Yeah, there are lots of versions, and the versions evolve. You know, I think that's probably with any suit. It's like like Dorian said, a lot of his trial and error. You're like, oh, that didn't quite look the way we wanted or feel, but that's also in pre-production. Like you go through a lot of prototypes to get the right thing. Yeah.
How does it feel to be part of the Star Wars universe? I mean, obviously you guys have been in the industry for a while. I don't know if anybody was a fan growing up, or this was just kind of another.
Yeah, I didn't realize it while it was happening, and I don't think I really realized it until I started to get to come to some of these events and meet people and see how how special it is to people. I don't think it was until the first time I got asked that question that I was like, oh, I'm a part of that. Because Dorian's heard this 100 times. My dad used to wake me up as Darth Vader. And it was, so my first experience with Star Wars was like, I kind of did not like it because my dad was like waking me up as Darth Vader. So that's not really a fun way to wake up. But yeah, when that starts to happen, it just becomes more special. When we're on set, there's no audience. Like I don't get to have you ask that question or see like people's responses. So these events have been really special because it makes it full circle, and you can see how special it is to people.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it doesn't sink in until it sinks in, sort of. Like you said, because you still treat it like a job, ready to go on the set, and you're doing your thing, and just, whether it's like, stress involved, or the professionalism aspect of your research and R&D, what you're doing to do the character. But then like I said, it's after the fact. You look up, you're like, oh, that's cool. Like, I get to be a part of that thing. But I think, on my end, I've tried to be in like anything Star Wars since I was 11 years old, and it just never came down the pipeline, and I was like, cool, it's never gonna happen. I'll still be a fan and watch, I'll watch like all the live action shows, and then I think it was I don't know. Every time we do panels, I was like, I always find like another layer of the onion for myself. I was like, oh, I never thought about it like that. I found it to be like, I was so trying for so hard to be a part of it, and by the time we got to it, I was really stoked, but then I was kind of like, cool, because you don't believe it till like you're on set, because you could be canceled like the last minute. You're like, hey, we're supposed to show up tomorrow. Something happened. It could be anything. There's so many layers to like why something happens with changing a character or an actor or something. And then while doing it, I was so stressed out because I didn't want to mess up. That, like you said, by the time the convention world came around, then I was like, oh yeah, like you said, we're a part of this. It just takes a while for that layer to just be accepted in your own world, and then and then we can just geek out like, oh yeah, what about this episode, or what about that? And then like I can like banter with them and go, oh yeah, I guess I'm part of that. So it's an interesting evolutionary process.
Yeah, the like what Dorian said, in so many jobs we have, like, you don't know what's going to air until it's on the screen. Like, until I've seen it at the same time you've seen it, you're like, well, I don't know, like maybe, I've done a few things where I'm like watching it and can't wait, and you're like, wait, my whole scene is gone. So yeah, you're kind of also just thankful that your scene showed up, your name showed up, and you're like, okay. I have a friend that won't tell anyone she's done anything until it actually shows up. So like,
Just
you
in
never
case.
know. Yeah. You sure you don't have a question? No? Okay. I feel like you've got lots of questions just swirling right up there.
Anybody else?
Did I see a Demogorgon on the photo out there? So you were in season 4?
Yeah, so that one I'm more geeked out about because it was so, I don't know why, initially, because I was a fan of, so season 4, the Russian prison Demogorgon.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. They
Yeah.
didn't show many in this season. They
In
didn't show
4?
any Demogorgons. So
Yeah.
that's why I knew it was probably the prison scene.
Yeah, the prison scene, because that one's bigger and taller and all that other stuff. And I'd been doing the same thing with that show. I was like, I could be a Demogorgon, I do creature work. And I would sit it away and like nothing ever, I didn't even get a response from anything. And I go, cool, I'm just going to be a fan,
It's
whatever.
like the 2 hottest like shows. You know,
It was-
Mandalorian and Stranger Things.
Yeah, it was cool. Then I got some, dude, I'm a Demogorgon, this is so cool. And then the same thing, like, you can't say anything to anybody. So even you're just holding on to like, you know, it's this thing that you're so excited about. I think that's the hard part too. You, even if you are excited about it and to be like, oh, I'm a part of this thing, you're like, you sit on it for like a year. So now it's like, you're over it to a certain extent, and then it comes out and you're like, oh yeah, I did that. Like, but it's this weird emotional like struggle because it's, you know, I get it because it has to be a surprise for everybody. And you don't want it leaking out there, but it's a really weird, emotional thing to deal with.
Yeah, that's why I asked, just because I always thought those were CGI. I never knew there was someone like manning those.
Yeah, and then, like I said, I can't speak for what they did for the previous seasons, for like 1 through 3, but for 4, it was, they actually, Netflix has a clip of before and after on that big fight scene, where I jump in on like wires, and then you'll see like me and green screen like hitting all these stunt guys around, and they're flinging around, falling all over the place and stuff too, so they got to utilize that a lot for that particular stuff with that character. I don't know how they did the other ones, but I was really happy the way they came out with this one, because that guy was pretty cool.
We get time for one more.
Question for Barry. What's it like to Darksaber fight Jon Favreau?
You know, John is always up for anything, and is a great storyteller, and he's very hands-on. So whether it's, you know, jumping on a speeder bike or wielding the Darksaber, he likes to give everything a try, so, and know how it works and how to make it better. So yeah, that's my answer.
I think you might be his action figures.
What's that?
I said he seems like a big kid. You guys might be his action figures.
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually have a magnet of Dave and John as kids, and they're a cart. I don't know who drew it. Maybe Dave drew it. I don't know. But it's like this of the two of them playing, like, hey, let's play Star Wars. But it's like of them as kids, you know. And the spirit of that, I think, is what people have loved about these shows, is that the people that are trying to do it, it's coming from like heart and soul. You know, it's coming from a very genuine place, and I think they've worked really hard to keep that so that it doesn't like fade out. You know. Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you everybody for coming. This is our last panel for tonight. Panels start tomorrow morning at noon. And thanks for being part of something that a lot of us have grown up with and giving us something new to watch and be around and be geeks about, even if we're getting old.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.